Kotor is often described as one of the most beautiful cruise ports in Europe, and visually, that's absolutely true. But it's also a port that can feel very different depending on how many ships are in, whether you're tendering, and how much you try to pack into one day. I've been to Kotor before, and it's one of those places that looks small and simple on paper, but catches people out in reality. Crowds, heat, tender timing, and that famous fortress climb can all shape your day more than you might expect. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 10 things you genuinely need to know before you step off the ship in Kotor. One thing many people don't realize about Kotor is just where it actually sits. Montenegro is a small country on the Adriatic coast, tucked between Croatia and Albania, and Kotor is right at the very end of a long, winding bay. That geography is what makes this place feel so dramatic. You're not just pulling into a port, you're sailing deep inland, surrounded by mountains on all sides. It's also the reason people often describe Kotor as fjord-like, even though technically it isn't one. Visually though, it absolutely feels that way. The sail-in, and often the sail away as well, are some of the highlights of the entire cruise day, so if you can, it's well worth getting out on deck to take it all in. Once you understand where Kotor actually sits, the next thing you need to know is how you get ashore. Most larger cruise ships anchor out in the bay, which means Kotor is usually a tender port. Smaller ships can sometimes dock closer to the old town, but it's safest to assume you'll be tendering. Tendering here can be straightforward, but it does take time, especially on busy days. When there are multiple ships in port, you can have several thousand passengers all trying to get ashore at the same time. The positive side is that this is one of the most scenic tender rides you'll do on a cruise. As you come in, you get incredible views of the coastline, the old town walls, and the mountains rising straight out of the water. Depending on where your ship anchors, you may even find yourself tendering past areas near Our Lady of the Rocks, which means you'll see some of those iconic sights from the water without needing to visit them separately. It's just important to factor tender time into your plans, especially if you're thinking about doing anything beyond the old town. This is one of the biggest things people underestimate about Kotor. When I visited, there were 7 cruise ships in port. One was docked centrally, and the rest were tendering. That completely changes the feel of the place. Kotor Old Town is compact, and once several ships arrive, the narrow streets can feel extremely busy, especially late morning. Add summer heat into the mix, and it can become quite intense. It's still beautiful, and still worth exploring, but it helps to know in advance that this is not a quiet, sleepy port on busy days. Starting early and pacing yourself makes a huge difference. Once you step off the tender, you're essentially at the gates of Kotor Old Town. There's no shuttle, no long walk, and no transport needed. That makes Kotor one of the easiest DIY ports in the Mediterranean. You can wander straight into the old town, explore at your own pace, and dip in and out of cafes, shops, and churches as you go. It's a UNESCO-listed medieval town, with stone walls, narrow streets, small squares, and historic buildings packed closely together. Everything is on the flat, and distances are short. If plans change, the weather turns, or crowds build, you're never far from somewhere to stop, sit down, or take a break. Make your way towards St. Tryphon's Cathedral. Even if you don't go inside, the square around it is a great place to pause, take photos, and get your bearings. It's also one of the cooler, more open spots when the old town is busy. After that, I dip into one or two of the smaller churches nearby. They're quieter, cooler, and give you a proper sense of how historic this place is, without feeling rushed. Once you've done that, everything else becomes optional. You can stop for a drink in the shade, browse the small shops. Kotor works best when you don't try to force a route. That alone can easily fill a couple of relaxed hours, and it leaves you with energy for anything else you decide to do later. Another thing that really catches people out is how hot it can feel, and how quickly conditions can change. Kotor Old Town is compact, surrounded by stone walls, and when there are several ships in port, it can feel extremely hot, especially in summer. The weather can also change very quickly here. Sunshine can turn into cloud or rain without much warning, particularly with the mountains so close. The good news is that Kotor is very forgiving if that happens. Churches like St. Tryphon's and St. Luke's aren't just beautiful, they're cooler and quieter, and they give you a natural place to slow down. Cafes, small shops, and museums also make it easy to take shelter, cool off, or wait things out without feeling like your day has fallen apart. Comfortable footwear, light layers, and not overcommitting early in the day make a big difference here. Let's talk about the fortress climb, because the views are incredible, but this is not something to take lightly on a cruise day. The hike up to the fortress above Kotor is famous, and the views from the top are genuinely breathtaking. You look straight down over the old town and across the entire bay, but this is not a casual walk. There are hundreds of uneven steps. The path is narrow in places, and once you commit, there's no easy way out. When it's busy, you'll have people going up and down at the same time, which can slow things down and make it feel chaotic. Add heat or sudden weather changes, and it becomes even more demanding. If you're fit, comfortable with steep climbs, and happy to take your time, it can be an incredible experience. But it's absolutely not for everyone. And it's fine to skip it and still have a brilliant day in Kotor. One of the biggest decisions in Kotor is whether to explore independently or book an excursion. And the right answer really depends on what you want from the day. Kotor is an excellent DIY port if you're happy staying local. The old town alone can easily fill your day without any stress. If you want to visit places like Parast or Our Lady of the Rocks, both DIY and ship excursions work. Excursions take the pressure off timing, especially on tender days. DIY options can be cheaper and more flexible, but depend heavily on weather and crowd levels. The key is not trying to do everything. Kotor rewards a slower pace, not a packed itinerary. One of the nicest things about Kotor, and something people often overlook, is just how relaxed the cafe culture and overall vibe are. Sitting in the shade with a drink or having a nice lunch, people watching in one of the small squares, is very much part of the experience. The old town is full of little cafes, tucked down side streets, and it's perfectly normal to stop and sit for a while and just take it all in. You'll also find lots of small shops selling local souvenirs, jewelry, and handmade items. Even if you're not planning to buy much, wandering through them adds to the feel of the place. One of the quirkiest and most memorable things about Kotor is the cats. You'll see them everywhere, lounging in doorways, wandering the squares, sleeping in the shade, and generally ruling the old town. Locals look after them, and they've become part of the character of the city. There are cat-themed shops, souvenirs, and even a small cat museum. It's not a major attraction, but it adds a lot of charm to simply wandering around. It's also a good reminder that Kotor isn't about ticking boxes. It's about atmosphere. The final thing to know is that you need to leave yourself more time than you think to get back to the ship, because it's usually a tender port. Getting back on board takes longer than just walking to a gangway. If you've climbed the fortress or walked the walls, factor in the walk back, any tender queues, and your ship's cut-off times. On busy days, queues build quickly in the afternoon, so I'd always head back earlier and take the stress out of it. So now you know exactly what to expect from Kotor. But other Mediterranean ports aren't this easy, and that's where people get caught out. If you want to avoid the biggest Mediterranean cruise mistakes, the next video you need to watch is on screen now.